Hello, good morning. My name is Alec Allee-Munoz, and I'm very proud to present my student Chris Wilson, who's been working very hard over the last year and a half, preparing a very ambitious piano repertoire. And so I'm very excited for you to hear what he's been working on.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining, whether it's live or really anytime in the future. We have 6 pieces today, 4 by me and 2 by Alec, and they span the romantic period of classical piano music, really classical music in general. And this is a event that originally we had planned to do with a live audience for at least 6 months. Since that's no longer possible, we're glad that you can join us in this sort of digital environment. And the purpose of this exercise, at least for me, has been that as much as there's a great joy in playing the piano for oneself, there's also something very ennobling about sharing that music with someone else or other people, no matter how polished or imperfect it may be. And it's also terrifying. and But this is a time when there are many things that are rather causing a lot of sort of anxiety, and so I think that it makes the practice of sharing one's appreciation of art all the more urgent and all the more necessary. So I hope we can communicate that urgency and that joy at a time when it's something we could all use. The first piece is by Frédéric Chopin, and it's a very short prelude, and Alex is going to tell you just a little bit about what a prelude is in the sort of canon of different types of piano pieces.
Sure. So a prelude, back in the day when the kings and queens financed everybody's work, artistic work, you didn't want to just go up to the piano and start playing. You wanted to start with a piece to warm up the piano, to make sure you knew what you were getting yourself into. Imagine they didn't tune the piano correctly. Well, the king doesn't care. He doesn't know that. He wants a beautiful, beautiful performance. And so artists would play a prelude to warm up the piano. Since then, it's obviously evolved into whole different meanings. But I'm excited to see for you to hear Chopin's interpretation of a prelude, and you'll see it's not just a warm-up piece. It's much more than that. So this recital is going to feature the entirety of the Romantic period. And to understand the Romantic period, I think it's actually helpful to kind of understand where it came from. And so before that, it's the classical period. And the classical period is around the same time as Newton. And so the people at that time believed in a divine order that was based off of rules and these simple to understand succinct rules, F equals ma. That also translated into the arts. They believed the most beautiful art in the world was based off of rules and this divine architecture. That's a very interesting definition, because if you would ask someone today, they would say art comes from the soul and the heart. And so that's what we start to see in the Romantic, a break away from these rules. But just enough so you have this beautiful medium between rule following and this passionate, beautiful melodies that do come from the soul. So it's this beautiful equilibrium during this period. And it starts with Beethoven. He's credited as the start of the entire period. And so he's the bridge between the classical and the Romantic period. And so he thought he was a genius. He wasn't just called a genius by others. He thought he was so clever for pushing the sonata form and all these musical forms forward, and he really did. And so we credit him with that. But this ends, or the middle of the period is Chopin, and so he epitomizes the period. He's right at the center of it. And us pianists really like to claim Chopin as one of our own, because he only composed for the piano. Except maybe a little bit of his concertos where he filled in some other instrumentation, but the piano is the center of his piece. And so he's considered one of the greats. And to be one of the greats and only compose for one instrument is truly a remarkable accomplishment. And so he's called the poet of the piano. And this starts to go into Rachmaninoff, where we start to see even more deviations from this Romantic form. So remember, the Romantic era is still based a lot on rules, but Rachmaninoff really starts to push these into even other genres of music, such as the impressionistic, and we start getting into the modern Bartok sounds.
So next, before we get to Rachmaninoff, which is coming, I'm going to be playing Chopin's C-sharp minor nocturne, which is among the more familiar of his nocturnes, and probably the most, at least the most recent appearance that it's made in culture is it's the piece that in the very beginning of the movie The Pianist with Adrian Brody, a great movie to watch if you're in the mood to weep uncontrollably. He's actually playing this prelude as bombs are falling in Warsaw. And it was published actually posthumously, and yet remains a piece that has endured and has evolved over the intervening years, and works in a lot of what we see with Chopin, who has both Polish and French influences, where, for example, this piece has a little kind of Polish dance just inserted quite seamlessly in the middle of sort of different themes. And so it's been a lot of fun to kind of explore how it develops as it goes. Okay, so Alec mentioned Beethoven's influence on the Romantic era of classical music, and so I'm going to turn over to him now to play the first movement, which is Grave of Beethoven's Pathétique Sonata.
So pathétique means passionate. And so you could really hear a wide range of emotions. It's sorrowful. It's almost kind of divine in some sections. It's anxiety ridden, or it could be excitement. And so it's a very moody, beautiful piece. And keep in mind, he wrote this when he was only 27. So this is kind of the start of a lot of his kind of taste. And so you can hear a lot of Mozart influence just in kind of the structure of the sonata. So sorry for you to hear.
So there's something extraordinarily satisfying and instructive about seeing a pianist of Alec's caliber and being able to actually stand over his shoulder or at least be near, as opposed to in the far back of the Kennedy Center, and really put the piano through its paces. We're now going to move way forward in time, relatively speaking, to Rachmaninoff, whose life spanned kind of many major world events. He was born in the very late 19th century in Russia, and his family got out of Russia before the Bolshevik Revolution. And eventually, after moving around quite a bit, ended up in the United States, in which he had toured extensively, and passed away in San Francisco in 1943. So he saw both the end of the Russian monarchy and then 1.5 world wars. And the name Rachmaninoff is often kind of synonymous with these gigantic, technically impossible pieces, the most famous of which is his third concerto, which was the subject of the movie Shine from 1996, which is this sort of semi-true story about a pianist who almost kind of lost his mind trying to learn the Rock 3, as they call it. We were going to play the Rock 3 today, but the orchestra didn't show up. So instead, I'm going to be playing a prelude that Rachmaninoff wrote in about 1902 or so, after a period of depression in which he had been unable to do much composing. And so this was kind of his a period fairly early in his career of kind of reignition for him. And Alex can tell you a little bit about where Rachmaninoff fits in the storyline that we're presenting.
Sure. And so we began with Beethoven, who kind of started the Romantic movement, Chopin, who epitomizes it, and Rachmaninoff, that kind of pushed it to boundaries that led to even other genres. And so this Rachmaninoff definitely didn't follow the rules. It's a lot more colorful. You notice a lot more interesting chords. You'll notice explosions of dynamics that don't follow the typical exposition, rising action, resolution. And so he plays with that kind of narrative progression of pieces. And so I hope you'll hear that in this next piece that Chris is going to perform.
So we're now going to turn things back to Alec for a piece called Un Sospiro from the Hungarian composer Franz Liszt.
And so Liszt was the virtuoso of his time and is considered by many to be the best pianist of all time. Some people thought he was possessed when he was playing. And many pieces that are considered very difficult were just child's play for him. He is alleged by legend that he just sight read Grieg's concerto as because they were colleagues at the time, and Grieg handed it over to see what he thought, and he just played it, sight read it all. It was considered a very difficult piece. And so Un Sospiro is one of his most loved. He's can be critiqued for being overly showy in some of his pieces, but people have noticed that he has very sophisticated melodies in it. So he's romantic, but you can hear some impressionistic melodies in this. And so a lot of people think that that's a sign of greatness, that he foresaw all these other genres and toyed with all these other beautiful melodies that other people, his contemporaries, were at the time. And so I hope you'll see the side, the Un Sospiro, the side, the beautiful melody that encompasses the piece.
So I was trying to follow. We have the sheet music here for that, but obviously Alec wasn't using it. And there are parts of it that actually have 3 registers, which you typically see when there are 2 people playing. There's a top register for like a violin and then for the piano. So I think I'm convinced that at least Liszt was possessed of something. We're going to finish our program today with a piece that may have been the very first that Alec and I worked on together and have revisited at different periods over the course of the last year and a half. And it's returning to the beginning, another prelude by Chopin in E minor.
And so this prelude, I think everybody will recognize, and it's a piece that pianists of all stages of their career perform. And I think you'll see why, because you could pour so much emotion to it, and it's really a living piece. It's not a stagnant. You play it one time, and that's how you play it the rest of your life. It's really living and evolving, and so I think that's why people revisit it at all stages of their career.
And what's been so rewarding for me from these lessons as a whole, and that's kind of encompassed in this piece, is that one of the things that Alec captures so well as a teacher is that the piano is, in some ways, a highly percussive instrument, in that unlike a sort of standard keyboard where you can hit it hard and it's louder, or hit it softer and it's softer. There are so many different mechanisms, and there's different names for all of them, for the angle at which you strike the key, the velocity in terms of how, sort of, even how far down the key goes. And there's so many ways to express different sounds. And as we've learned those different techniques for different pieces, that has enriched this particular piece, which is on this sort of this palimpsest of technique as one progresses. Just to give you an example, if you want to play a chord and express one particular note, in some cases you use what is called the pool cue, which is that's named for when your hand is, feel free to correct me here, but one hand one finger is sort of the pool cue that strikes at a different angle than the others. And it actually works. You can hear that one note better than all the others, and there's many other ones. So we're going to close with the E minor Prelude by Frédéric Chopin.
And so that concludes our program. I hope everybody's giving Chris a round of applause back at home. Worked very hard these past year and a half, and it's been an honor to work with him. It's been great to share my love of music with somebody that loves music just as much, and so it's been a real honor.
This is a thank you, and this is a bittersweet moment because Alec, in addition to being a virtuoso pianist, is brilliant in many things, and will be off to California fairly soon to start med school in the fall. So I'm really going to miss these lessons because I think we speak the same language in many ways and have the same appreciation of not only classical music but classical physics and mechanics.
It's true.
And yet, one of the marks of a great teacher is that they teach you to teach yourself as you go. And so this has by far been the most enriching musical education that I've ever had. And I just want to wish Alec the best of luck and know that I'm definitely going to still be practicing.
Wonderful. Keep it up.
All right.
Thanks,
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.